welcome everyone. I'm joined today by Steve Browne, author, Vice President of HR at La Rosa's Pizzeria, and a general HR enthusiast and blogger. So welcome, Steve.
Thanks, David. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, it's excellent to have you. So we're going to be talking today about a few different things. We're just going to kind of let the conversation roam, but I wanted to start off with a question. We just concluded our State of HR survey. It's an annual thing that we do, and we usually put a report out around December. And one of the things that came out of it was when we asked people about the biggest challenges, the top answer for the biggest challenges that they experienced in 2020, the top answer was budget cuts. And when we look ahead, there's a lot of talk about different things HR has to do in 2021. But do you think, what I wanted to ask you is, do you think HR professionals are going to kind of have to learn how to be a bit more thrifty in how they do it? Or do you think the budget aspect of it changes with a new fiscal year? So were the cuts sort of a reaction, I guess I would say, to the pandemic, and we'll see things go back to normal? Or is this something that we're going to be dealing with long term?
I think it's more of a long-term run on a lot of reasons, for a lot of reasons. And one of them is this: the work model has changed. When you look at something as simple as what we're doing, to be able to connect virtually and have that be the norm versus the outlier in the past, that has significantly changed how people are spending their money. Because if I don't have to provide an office space for you, I can allocate that money elsewhere. On top of that, though, people took staffing reductions pretty seriously. I don't think there was a glut. When you look like at 2008, there was a glut. And when we hit the recession, people cut because they had been overstaffed in quite a few areas. Now we're not sure how work's going to look. Therefore, we're making cuts because we're being financially pressed and financially strained. When you look at the retail and hospitality industry, especially, which is where I'm at, you're seeing things. I saw an email came out from National Restaurant News last week that IHOP and Applebee's are going to close 100 stores. And that's budget. And there's no other thing, because the patterns of how people are being consumers has changed. I'm old enough now. Well, we said in 2000, everybody's going to be on the computer and everybody's going to buy everything online. And it didn't happen because it wasn't ready yet. 20 years later, it is.
Yeah.
So in-person things aren't as prevalent when it comes to buying patterns. And those in turn affect companies and how they do their budget. So HR has to be a business person all the time. I think we have to quit trying to say we're in HR. We're business people. We should understand how budgets affect staffing levels throughout the company, not just, what happens to training, what happens to comp, what happens to the normal traditional areas of HR. Our job should be, how is the budget affecting the entire organization?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think, I live in Florida and they're still building a lot of commercial spaces. And I think to myself, I don't know how this is going to pan out in the next 5 years,
Right.
It'll definitely be fascinating to see kind of how that evolves. But, so when it comes to budget concerns, whether you're getting more or less budget, I think scrutiny placed on the spending will be significant. Is something we're going to see a lot of. And now your business is hospitality, and 2020 has obviously been a journey for you all. What sort of things are people in that sector focused on when it comes to investment, if anything?
I think the biggest shift you're going to see, David, is a focus on retention, far more than in HR. Everybody talks about the talent pipeline. In hospitality, it's talent acquisition. Like, how to identify people, but we're competing for the same labor pool. And that labor pool has shrunk. Again, predictions. There was going to be a labor shortage in 2008, and it didn't happen. Well, now that labor shortage that did happen was just kind of guised because of all of the unemployment and layoffs. Now it's happening, and there's 10% unemployment. Yeah. So there's not as many available people, and work has changed, even in the in-person side of hospitality. I'll give you a good example. We've been a delivery, carry-out, and dine-in location for years. But we had been talking about doing curbside pickup for the last 3. And we're like, do we need to do it? Do people really want that? Well, then behold the pandemic, and people don't want you to have that in-person touch. So we switched to curbside pickup in one day after being hesitant to doing it for 3 years. So agility is a huge issue. Agility is forcing HR to take a leadership role, look and say, how are we affecting the business instead of, and how is it affecting the people? But retention is the biggest focus. The second biggest focus on the people aside from an investment piece goes along with retention. That's development versus just measuring performance. In the past, everybody's like, the report card. Hey, David, you're doing well. 6 months later, hey, David, you're doing well. A year later, hey, David, you're doing well. Those days are gone in all industries, especially in ours. Ours has to be, you're doing well, David. How can I help you do more? Would you like to do more? Would you like to grow with the organization? And the third part, especially in the hospitality side, is transferring to a, how do I take care of you while you're with me? Because we are going to have turnover. We are going to have people move through. But during your time with us, did you enjoy what you did? Were you able to contribute and add value? And if you did, that's wonderful. If we're preparing you for your next career outside of us, great. But in the past, it was fill the schedule, fill the schedule, fill the schedule. Now it's let's make sure to value those that we have at the time we have them.
Yeah. And I think, we've heard that conversation a lot around reskilling and helping folks, find that next thing, whatever it is on the career ladder or lattice, helping them find the right options.
I like that they're talking more about reskilling and upskilling versus cross-training. It's
Mm,
a whole different perspective. Cross-training is I can do 17 jobs. Instead of saying I do these well and I have the skills that are transferable. I think it's a healthier way to look at it.
yeah, I would absolutely agree, especially in a time where, burnout is so prevalent and people are, having a lot of demand put on them. Um, Obviously hospitality, it's an industry that's been hit hard by this pandemic. And, uh, you know, what's the journey kind of been like for you as you, from an HR perspective, putting people back into stores? I'm sure that's presented quite a challenge for you. Kind of take us through what that's been like, or what are some of the lessons you feel like that you can apply to the future as well?
The biggest thing that was an aha type of moment was I love it when speakers or bloggers or authors say, bring your 100% self to work, because we don't believe it and we don't really want it to happen. Because if you bring your whole self, you're like, oh, and we think the worst. I've never seen such heightened stress, anxiety, frustration, emotions. The littlest thing turns into a giant confrontation. These emotions had been bubbling under the surface for years in all workplaces, but especially in restaurants. We're in the people business. And so 100% of what we do during the day involves people, whether it's our team members or our guests. And along with that comes all of the emotions of people. We've tried to control or suppress them, but now it's out. And so the learning is, how do I equip my managers to help them do better when things get emotional? How do I help them address the emotions, not ignore the emotions or try to play them off? And three, how do you not have them deflect conversations?
Mhm.
Oh, David, I'll get back to you. Let's go at it right now. I had a manager come out one time right during the height of things in the spring, before this next fun wave has come through. But she had addressed a team member very professionally and said, please do this. And, I want you to take a little space in here, and doing some of the initial reactions to trying to be safe and safe measures. And he made a smart comment to her because he was young and impetuous and because it was fun to do. She lost it. So crying, swearing, you name it. So I said, tell me his name. I went back to him. I said, hi, come here. Um, this is not how we treat each other. And if you choose to treat each other, we don't need you here because you think it's funny and we're in a very difficult situation. And I had the district manager with me and he said, boy, that's a different way to handle this. So we didn't discipline him. We didn't fire him. We addressed him and said, your behavior is inappropriate because. It was a great coaching moment. I think the thing that I'd love to see HR people pick up during this time is the opportunity to coach behavior instead of addressing behavior. So when you coach behavior, you acknowledge it, you don't have to like it, but you work through it. If it does lead to discipline, termination, all those things, fine. But really it should be, I understand you're emotional, I'm emotional. Gosh, the week that we're in of the election, holy moly. I mean, that just adds another layer. The other thing I've seen though that has been a real shift is the pressure on families.
Mm,
We have working families. We have working families with children. We have all types of family structures, from single parent families to spouses, partners. I mean, you name it, we have it. And to try and be a shift oriented business that still has people facing those family challenges during a pandemic,
mm,
that has been very, very challenging. We've had to be much more agile and adaptable to
yeah.
try and do our best to switch schedules, to staff differently, so that people can still be good parents and caregivers at home.
Yeah, that's a big challenge. And it's like you said, it's an emotional thing for everybody. We're all going through these things, and people deal with things differently. And that mental health piece is significant in an industry like yours. I mean, we hear so much about the isolation sort of factor and the talk about remote workers, but for people working in industries where there are, like you said, you're in the people business, and they're coming in contact with a good amount of people, and there's some stress related to that just because of the nature of this situation. So have you seen the nature of work having an impact on people, and how have you gone about helping them deal with kind of that stress side of it?
A couple things. I'm trying to teach people to listen to understand versus listen to solve. So we tend to be people that want to fix things all the time. The challenge was that is we only fix it from our perspective, our biases, our filters. It's a huge issue because when you look at things such as diversity, inclusion, things like that, I come from where I come from.
Hmm.
So instead of coming in and going, well, I know how to solve it, and the minute David starts talking to me, 3 words in, I go, got it, David, here we go. I got to let you work through it. One of the real nice shifts I've seen in the profession is the difference between well-being and wellness.
Mm,
Well-being sounds more well-rounded, more holistic, but it also acknowledges the reality of mental health. I think we've overlooked it. We've made it too much of a stereotype for too long. Mental health and mental well-being is needed for everybody. So if I see you about to pop, I'm coming in and going, hey, David, I think you need to take a day off, and it's cool. Let's do that. And try and help them through the blind spots, because trying to keep them more even keeled but less controlling, and that's hard because several people from the operations side or the corporate side think that we have to put all these systems into control instead of parameters in to perform. I had a conversation with one of our executive team. I said, I think it's great how we've responded to COVID. It's been amazing. And the team has come together, and people are collaborative that weren't. People got out of their silos, and we're all going at this. I said, isn't it interesting that we do that during a crisis? Shouldn't we also do that for performance? So it's hard to see organizations just go crisis to crisis to crisis and still expect to perform. I would rather see a shift and say, all of the great skills we've learned now, let's have that same passion and forward momentum from performance. And you can teach that at every level, from the general manager to the assistant manager to the frontline person. And spend more time encouraging people, spend more time listening, spend more time trying to understand their situation, not judge their situation. It just takes a lot different effort than what people traditionally do in HR.
yeah, I think there's a lot of lessons that when we come out of this, it's if you can make it kind of permanent, then maybe when the next crisis comes around, you're not so much learning and adjusting, you're just there naturally. So but hopefully that's one of the positives to come out of it.
I hope so.
Never let a good crisis go to waste, right? I hear that expression a lot these days.
How true.
So when we look ahead, what do you think the most important thing is for HR as an industry? it's going now. It's like it's got the seat at the leadership table.
Mhm.
It's a bit more concrete, I think, than it's ever been, and it's coming at a time when there's a lot of significant shifts around the workforce. So, what's kind of the most important things for HR as an industry as a whole to learn and remember and take forward?
Have a different view on this than most. I think if you really sit back and look at situations that face organizations, they are people first always. And when people say, "Oh no, it's a purchasing issue. Oh no, it's an operations issue," listen to the next word. They'll say, "I'll give you a good example," and this is just hypothetical, so people don't go, "What? What's going on?" "Hey, we don't have enough cheese for our pizza." "Gee, we didn't make the order, or the supply chain got messed up." And Steve, the next sentence or the next thing is the person. You go, well, have we helped Steve? Does Steve have the tools that he needs? Does Steve have the connections and resources he needs internally? HR can be that connector, both as an executive if they're at the executive level, or in teaching the executives if they're not at the executive level. All issues are people first. It always is. If you start with your people first, and then you get the equipment involved or the systems involved that they need, you're going to have different results. If we keep going systems, results, the people are still there. So I love when you said, we've kind of been recognized now because it's been such a people oriented crisis.
Hmm.
My thing is, it always has been.
Yeah.
Now own it. Now take it. So, when you talk about Julie down in operations, well, how are we helping Julie do her best? Instead of, are we measuring Julie to see what she's doing wrong in order to try and change her? Flip it, reframe the conversation. The other part of it, David, is I don't think that we can give up and go backwards. We tend to settle. People get all excited about something and then they come back down. I think you need to say, we were called upon to lead, we did. Now, how do we lead more and be
Mm,
consistent and effective? And stop the seat at the table argument. Just stop it. Just be a leader because you're in HR, and you should be the connecting point for your people in your organization.
absolutely. Um, so you wrote a book a couple years ago called HR on Purpose. It's done pretty well from what I've seen. So I think for some of our listeners will recognize you from that alone. But you've also come out with a book that is something of a follow up this year titled HR Rising. Can you kind of talk about that and what you wanted to achieve with that book, and how it's going to help readers as they read it in 2020?
Sure. My first book was I was tired of people apologizing for being in HR. When you go into a room and you go, "Hi, I'm in HR," they go, "Oh, I'm sorry," and "Oh my God, that's so awful," and we go, "I know," and when you read blogs, it's just, "Oh, woe is me, I'm in HR," and I was like, that's got to stop. So the first part about it was owning what we do, like every other profession does very well. We need to mimic that and say, I love what I do. I'm in this on purpose. And now this part is, how do you move the organization forward from the HR seat? Not
Um,
from the HR role. Like, I don't have to be a CHRO to be a leader. If I am, that's awesome. But I know CHROs who aren't leaders, just as I do chief marketing officers or CEOs. It's not a title issue. It's a, how do I approach what I do in HR? So the whole point is to call people to lead. A little bit of what you talked about in the prior question. There's no reason why we can't be the ones who drive things forward in a positive way, not from an ego way, but from an organizational effectiveness way. Uh, we should be the people who champion the culture to move the organization forward along with everybody else. But you're like a big conductor. How do I pull you all together? And so I'm excited about it. I've heard good things from people so far.
yeah,
And I just want people to understand that you have someone, at least a practitioner, who believes in what you do and wants you to do better.
excellent. Well, thank you, Steve, for joining us today. For the audience, if you want to check out Steve's book, HR Rising, it's available on Amazon. You can always keep up with him on social media or on his blog called Everyday People at www.sbrownehr.com. But Steve, it's been fun talking to you. I really appreciate you coming on today.
David, I really appreciate the chance, and it's great to talk to you as well.